Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell the neighborhood and everyone around. Tell them about the EPs. 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 The EP apostrophe S. Yeah. Tell your mom about the EPs. Tell your dad about the EPs. Tell your girlfriend about the songs they sing. Tell everybody you wanna hear them sing. Tell everybody you are a big fan of the EPs. Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell your friends about the EPs. Yeah, 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 yeah. Tell them in the US. Tell them in the US. Tell them who you like best. Tell them in the US. Tell them in the UK. Tell them in the UK. Tell them in the UK the EPs are really okay. Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell your friends about the EPs. Tell the world about the EPs. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Tell them about the EPs.
The EP.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the Plastic EP and Vicky show. How are you today, Vicky?
Hi, everybody.
Now let me tell you,
Welcome.
we've got a very special guest. Joie, Gould, Gati, coming in from the US. How are you today, Joie?
I'm terrific. I'm fine. Thank you.
That's great. Now, we've got some fantastic stories to tell you. And we also want to tell you we're celebrating something on the show, aren't we, Vicky? What is it?
Yes, so can I also welcome everyone to the Plastic EP and Vicky show. We want to congratulate Plastic on his 450th show. This is it, the 450th show. So yay, congratulations.
Hey, bravo.
And let me tell you, having Joey on the show is justified because being a great Monkees fan, you just don't know how much this interview means to me because Joey has some fantastic stories to tell us. Joey was there when the Monkees were being launched, and what a fantastic story it is. You're working for Columbia Pictures. We'll let you tell the story. And what happens is, I believe you're in the lunchroom, and some producers came up to tell you about a pilot they were shooting. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. Well, these two guys came up. One was Bert Schneider, and the other one was Bob Rafelson. I had never seen them before. I never knew who they were because I was in film on the Columbia Pictures and they were in Screen Gems, which is TV. And they heard that I was English and they just assumed because I was English and it was the 60s that I knew everything about music and groups and things. And I had just actually come back from London. So, and I was in a mini skirt. So I looked the whole sort of 60s Dolly Bird girl. And they said they just made a pilot and they asked if I would please come with them and look at the pilot and give them my opinion on what they thought. And I said, well, I'm not an expert at groups and music. I'm more in movies. And they said, no, you're young and it'll be fine. So I didn't go that day. I went another day to the screening room and I felt so important that they had this private screening room and we were sitting there. And I just thought it was a complete mess, actually, when I first saw it, because I couldn't quite understand what was going on. They were kind of just introducing the boys in that sort of quick cut way and like Help and Dick Lester kind of style. And I said, well, I think it's going to be a huge hit. I really didn't know what I was talking about. But then I decided that they started telling me about how they auditioned all these different actors. They weren't actually a group. They formed the group. The producers formed the group. And after I left them, I just thought, oh, that's a really fascinating story, how they got this whole thing together, because it's so unusual. You know, all the groups are usually kids that grow up together and they all do it in their garage and stuff. So I wrote this piece about these producers that had auditioned all these kids and got these people together. And there's this new pilot. And I sent it to some teen magazines in London. Since I was English, I figured I'd work with English magazines. And they all sent them back, rejected them, because they said they'd never heard of the Monkees, they'd never heard of me, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And that was it. And then the following, I think the next month, the Monkees came on American TV and they were immediately a smash, you know, straight away. So all these people sent me telegrams. They all wanted me to write more stories and stuff. So I went to see Bert and Bob and said, you know, I got all these inquiries. Can I write some stories? And they said, sure, come on the set every day. So I started originally a Monkees column. It was my own Monkees column. And I would just hang out with the boys on the set and just write down bits and pieces of their antics and what they were eating. You know, kids just like to know what they're wearing, what they're eating. And I got so much fan mail from all these kids in London, England, actually, all over England. And so I went to Bert and I said, oh, you know, this column's a huge hit. So he said, well, I tell you what we could do. We could you could ghostwrite the boys each week. That all have one of them will have their own column. And just hang out with the boys for a couple of days, find out what they're thinking, what they're doing, and then just write a column for them. And the kids will think it's the Monkees writing to them. So that's how it just all sort of came organically. And then I met the boys before they were really famous. So they felt really comfortable with me and they knew I wouldn't be spying and saying horrid things about them. So I was really one of the only journalists at that time that got into their recording sessions. They weren't allowed to have a journalist in their recording sessions because they used a lot of backup guys because two of them couldn't even play instruments. So they always used, and then they didn't want journalists writing this, you know, they wanted to keep them very pure. So, and I agreed to do that. I wouldn't write any scandalous things about them. I would just make them like sugar coated, you know, these sweet little boys. But in actual fact, they were quite wild, you know. But yeah, so that's how it all sort of started, really. And so I got to hang out with them and I became really friendly more with, I think Peter Tork and Mike Nesmith were my really close buddies. I hung out with them a lot.
Who was the first person you told about this fantastic opportunity that you had?
Ivor Davis, actually.
Oh.
I thought I would give the story to Ivor. I mean, that's how he doesn't remember it. I do. Because he was a journalist and I wasn't really. I was a writer, but I wasn't really a journalist. And so I said, you know, I got this great story. You know, these people, they auditioned all these actors, they're putting this group together. It's all sort of so strange. It was at the time strange. It doesn't sound so strange today. And he said, oh, the Daily Express don't want that kind of story. He said, you write it. You know, you've got all the information and everything. So he was the one that really encouraged me, Ivor.
65, they got together. The TV show was shown in September 1966. Now,
yeah.
Was this happening when you first went to see the screening of the pilot? Are we talking 1966 or 1965?
Yeah, 1966. I mean, literally, as soon as they had just kind of got the pilot, I think they had it was going to be on Screen Gems, but no one had seen it yet except the executive people. No, the public hadn't seen it. And I saw it literally. I mean, I came back to America in 1966. I mean, I met them almost immediately they made this pilot. It was just sort of very sort of like how everything was lined up. I mean, I wasn't interested in music to write about, you know, I mean, I love to go and listen to it, but that wasn't what I was writing about. So it was very organic. And it was just, yeah. So right from the very beginning, I was with Bert and then they were just these struggling they weren't struggling because they were both very wealthy, but they were young producers and they went on to do, you know, Oscar nominated movies eventually. After they made a bunch of money, the boys didn't get, I mean, that was another thing. The boys didn't get paid very much. I mean, I think they got like $200 a week or something.
They're on a salary, I think it was $400 a week each, but it's only money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think the reason at the end there was a clash. It was about the music, their albums, because they were being told exactly what to record by their record producer, because they wanted to keep it very sweet, and they wanted to, you know, tweens, not to be sophisticated. The boys wanted to be more sophisticated. They wanted to be like, you know, like into with Bob Dylan and the Beatles. They wanted to mature, and they weren't really allowed to. They were really under the thumb of the producers. So I think was their kind of demise.
I just want to ask you, Davy Jones was English, as we know, like yourself. Was he very happy to talk to someone that was from English background?
I think he was. He was. He wasn't. I mean, I got on with that. He wasn't he didn't talk. It was hard for him to talk about himself, strangely enough, as an actor. He was a very sweet boy, but I really didn't. Whenever I was around him, and talked to him, I really didn't feel like I knew who he was or what he. You know, he wasn't very open. I don't know how he wasn't very introspective, and he wasn't very open. But he was a very nice boy. He actually lived near me when I had an apartment in Hollywood. We lived near, so I often just went over there and had dinner with him. We just talked about England. We didn't talk about work or anything. We just talked about England and growing up, because he was a child actor. So he, you know, I think he was under a little bit more pressure, you know, because I think his career wasn't going very well before that, and this was a big opportunity for him.
He played in Coronation Street. I mean, that's pretty big.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was a young boy then, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. When he was young.
Yeah, I mean, he was very successful when I think he was in Oliver as well, wasn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well done.
Yeah.
Now, I got to ask you, did you find Mickey funny? Was Mickey funny from the start?
Mickey was funny. Yeah, he was more mucking around. He wasn't witty, you know. He was just more like mucking around. He wanted to be the center of attraction all the time, you know. He was a bit of a show off in a nice way, but he was a bit more of a show. I think Talk and Mike Nesmith were much more mature, because they were into music, and you could really sit and talk to them. You know, you could have I got really good information from them, and Peter was really very, very sweet, very spiritual, very sweet. And I would just often go to his apartment, just have lunch. In fact, one day I went up there to have lunch with him, and there was a guy sleeping on his couch that night. And he said, "Oh, Stephen's going to join us for lunch." And I said, "Oh, great." It was Stephen Sills. And he just arrived in Hollywood. And I said, you know, he was telling me he's a guitarist, and he was, you know, a songwriter. And I said, you know, I have a column. I'm going to put you in my column, because one day you might be famous. I thought I was doing him a favor. And then he went on very quickly after that to become really huge. But he was really sweet. Yeah, he was sleeping on Peter's couch when I first met him.
You saw the Monkey Mobile. Did the producers or the crew ever take you for a drive in the Monkey Mobile?
No, I don't think they could, for insurance purposes. I don't think they were allowed to.
Would you have liked to have gone in the Monkey Mobile?
I think so. I never really thought about it, but yes, now I would. Yeah, and I'd like to be able to say yes to you. Yes, I'd like to say, yeah, I went on. But I remember one day I went to buy a car with Mike, because, you know, Mike came from a very wealthy family. His mother was, as you know, she patented that write-off. And he said to me, would I come with him to buy a car, speaking of cars? And I went to a showroom with him. I think he was getting a Cadillac. And he walked in with that little beanie on, and he looked all scruffy. The green hat. And the guy looked at him and thought, "Oh God, you know, I have to deal with this." And so they kind of begrudgingly asked him if he needed some help. And he said, "Yeah, I'm looking for a car." And they said, "Which one?" He pointed to this like Cadillac convertible. And they said, "Oh, you know, I can't remember how much it was, but it was a lot of money." So he said, "That's okay, I've got the cash." And he pulled out this whole wad of cash and started peeling off all these $100 bills. So I mean, I remember that, going to buy a car. I didn't write about that because I didn't think that was something.
No, that's a fantastic story. Believe me, being there when Mike buys a Cadillac, can you tell me what color was the car? Was it white or black?
I think it was white. It was pale anyway. I'm not quite sure if it was pale blue, but it was light. It was a light. It wasn't black.
And did he drive you home in that car?
No, he didn't take it with him. I think he had to go through his manager. I don't know if he had enough money to buy the whole thing. I had to go through his manager, and they had to sort of do all the paperwork and stuff. So no, I didn't get a ride in it.
That's a fascinating story. Have you got anything else like that you did with any of the Monkees that no one knows? Tell us something that no one knows.
Well, I did. I was at this. I don't know if anyone knows this, but I mean, I haven't spoken about it very often. I was at a recording session once with them, and I was going to go off to the Monterey Pop Festival this is 1968 now, a couple of years later, and I was at a recording session, and I had to get to LAX by a certain time because there's only like one flight to Monterey. It wasn't a big airport. And anyway, they were all mucking around there, and we all got involved and everything. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, I've missed my flight. You know, I'm never going to get to the airport in time. So Mickey said, oh, don't worry. Pete and I are going up there tonight. We've got a plane. We've got our own private plane at Santa Monica. And you can come with us. And I said, oh my God. So so in the middle of the night, we finally left the studio, drove to the airport. And it's not very far, Monterey, from here. Maybe it's like an hour, I think. So we went off, and it was all very dramatic. We went off in the middle of the night into this beautiful, and in those days, going in a private plane, I'd never been in a private plane before. You know, it was like nobody, like now, it's like everyone goes in private planes here. And we went off, and they couldn't land in Monterey. It was too foggy because it's right on the coast. So we had to fly all the way up to San Jose, and then get a taxi all the way back. So we didn't arrive into Monterey until the following, like early in the morning, like breakfast time in the morning. But it was such fun because everybody was in such good humor, and we had such a good time. We were in a taxi for like 2 hours or 3 hours. And it took longer to get from San Jose to Monterey by taxi than the whole flight took. So that was fun. I don't think I wrote about that. I think that was something I didn't write about. It just sounded a bit.
How unbelievable to be on a plane with the Monkees.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and they were in Monterey Pop Festival amongst all those people. You know, that was the first big. It was before Woodstock. It was the first rock concert of that time, and it was really it was so exciting. I mean, it was a 3-day thing, and everyone was there, and yeah, it was the Mamas and the Poppers. John Phillips organized it, and a friend of mine, Derek Taylor, who was he used to be the manager of the Beatles. Not the manager, he's the PR guy of the Beatles. Yeah, they organized it, and yeah, it was really exciting.
So Joey, having spent so much time with the Monkees, who in fact was your favorite Monkee?
Well, I can't decide. I think I'm between Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork. I think were my favorite because they were just really nice guys and interesting guys, and not that the others weren't. The others were more involved with themselves. The others were more. They had more mature. They had evolved a lot with their own selves. You know, Peter was very spiritual, and Mike was just he was much more sophisticated than the others. And so yeah, but I liked them all. I had such fun with them all. Really, they were like brothers. You know, and they always felt very comfortable because I knew that that journalists could write, you know, horrible things about them, you know, because if they're smoking dope or something, they would write about that, and they don't want that. The producers didn't want that image, you know, because the Monkees were supposed to be very, you know, for kids. And so they knew they could do anything around me. I would never write about it or never talk about it to anyone. And so that was a nice feeling to be around them and be very comfortable in, you know, so it was kind of like a fun, unexpected fun experience for me.
So Joey, can you tell us about when you were writing for the fabulous 208 magazine?
It was pretty exciting. I had never met them. You know, I did all this by mail and telex. We had in those days we had like telex rather. It's kind of like they were like a telegram but much faster. And they were the first people that I made a deal with to do I did sell other stories to other magazines under a different name because I was exclusively with Fabulous and with the producers. I made a deal with both the companies. To be exclusive, but other people wanted stories, I would do it under a different name, like New Musical Express and those music papers. It's called Fabulous because at the time there was an offshore radio station because, you know, the BBC would not play rock and roll. They only played like pop music, you know, like popular music, not rock and roll. And so this boat, if you're out on a certain mileage out of England, you're not in the English territory. So it was called it was called Radio Luxembourg because it was near Luxembourg, the country Luxembourg. So it was called Radio Luxembourg. And on the dial, on our radio dial, it was 208 on the dial.
Oh,
That's how I think that's how I got it. And all the kids would listen to that because that's where they heard all their music. And fabulous was everybody, that's what the word was in those days. Everyone said, oh, it's fab, you look fabulous. Fabulous. So the magazine, I mean, it wasn't very sort of imaginative, but they called themselves Fabulous 208. And it was a huge sort of seller and I used to interview like movie stars and not just rock groups, but movie stars. I wasn't just with the Monkees. I interviewed all the rock groups that came through LA from England and American actors that were very popular in England. And so I had this nice little thing going.
And how great was it working with the Monkees?
Well, I had really a lovely time with them. I never saw them as like famous rock stars. I just saw them as these kids that were doing really well for themselves. And I think that around me, they didn't put on any airs and graces because, I kind of knew them before and it would be ridiculous for them to suddenly start doing a bit number. But I know that they did do numbers to other people. But I never found, they were never, I mean, I really was very lucky. I mean, they would never all stand together for a photograph. They'd always be like 2 of them here and 2 of them there because they knew that the photographer would get a fortune to have a picture of the 4 of them together. So so just because they were just being perverse or whatever. But I used to have them, I said, I need a picture of you for the cover of all of you together. And that's it. And then they would just do it. And my photographer got paid a fortune. I mean, I didn't know it. I got them always, I had pictures of myself with them, all together. They just didn't do that. They didn't, it's very hard fame, as you know, and I'm sure you've interviewed people that that are famous and have been, that people behave very differently when they're famous. They suddenly, and become really difficult and they have airs and graces, but I didn't have any of that problem with them. Sometimes they couldn't be bothered when I was doing their ghostwriting with their column and I needed to be with them to find out what they're doing that week or what they're thinking about. And they said, oh, I can't really be bothered. And I said, well, it's going to be really it's going to be a boring column with just your name on it and nothing written. And so it's like talking to children. I would suddenly coax them, it took a while, sometimes 2 days to get them to sit with me and to talk, because after a while, they just didn't want to do things. I guess they were coming at them from all angles,
Did the Monkees throw a few parties? You were invited to a few parties either from Columbia or Screen Gems?
I didn't go to, I mean, I kept it really on a business level. I never went to their parties. I never went out with them. I went to dinner with Davey because he lived near me and stuff. And if I went out with them, it was just purely friends. I didn't want to get involved with them because, their parties were kind of rowdy and, things were happening. And I didn't want to know about that. I didn't want to have to deal of saying, if anyone asked me, I would say, I don't know what they do socially. I never see them socially, so I could get away with it. So I kind of kept it, I kind of put a border there, a boundary. I thought it was much better,
Did you meet up with some of these British bands when they came to America?
Yeah, I met, it's hard for me to remember all the bands I met up with, but I do remember when the Cream came for the first time, the original Cream came over and they weren't at all famous in America and they were doing their first US concert and they were staying in a little motel on Sunset near are you familiar with Hollywood?
Yes, I know a bit about Hollywood, yes.
The Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Strip, which is kind of iconic. And they were staying near there. And so I said, before I do the interview, I think we should walk up to the Whiskey A Go-Go and you guys should just stand outside because it'll be a great picture. You in Hollywood and da-da-da. Oh, you don't want to do that. That's boring. I mean, they were really difficult. They didn't want to do anything I asked them to do. And then they didn't really want to talk to me. We were sitting in this motel room, and every time I said something, they would kind of look up there and say, you know what? I just felt like going to a pub. And I said, you've just arrived in America. Why would you want to go to a pub? I'll take you for a hamburger or something. No, I want to go to a pub. And I said, okay, I'll take you to a pub. And there was a pub called the Cock and Bull, which was up the road from the Whiskey A Go-Go. And I said, I'll take you to a pub if you take a photograph outside the Whiskey A Go-Go, because it's literally on the way. And all you have to do is stand there for like 2 minutes. And Cyril, my photographer, will take a photograph. And they finally condescended to do it. They were like so difficult. And after they had a pint and a shepherd's pie, they were in much better moods. And I got a nice interview with them. Yeah, they were.
When you're reflecting back on the 60s, how great was the Monkees phenomenon?
Well, Vicky and Plastic, when I was actually in the middle of it all, I didn't realize what was going on. I was inside and I wasn't looking from the outside. So I didn't quite realize how huge they actually were. It wasn't until afterwards, that I realized that I was there. When I was actually in it, it just seemed like I was with these young guys and they were like putting on a show. I did go and see them at the Hollywood Bowl. And then I realized, because everyone, was in the Hollywood Bowl is huge and there was packed and screaming and da-da-da. So I realized then, but most of the time I was just with them on one-on-one. We were just talking about things that I could write about for my column and their column. And so I wasn't really aware of what was happening, what was going on outside. So it was really after the fact that I realized, that I was there and I didn't.
You were part of it.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it was so organic that I didn't realize what was going on and how important they were. And I would just hang out with them and not even think about it, So I think when you look back, it's very different. I'm sure the same with you.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joey, now, when you look back, you'll understand, I totally understand that when this is happening and starting off and no one wants to know the Monkees and you're writing to the UK, put them in the magazine, do this, do that, and no one cares, no one knows. Even Ivor knocked them back, right, because didn't know what they were, and he's the man with the Beatles. 5 weeks on tour with the Beatles' first US tour, and he met, when Elvis met the Beatles, he was there, and he didn't know what the Monkees were. Unbelievable that you were there in the bubble, and of course no one knew what was going on. The Monkees didn't even know when they were a success with the pilots. I mean, we're getting a story, and your story of being there is so unique that the producers came up to you to ask your opinion. I mean, to me, it's mind-blowing. You should actually write a book. We'd love you to write a book.
I'm trying to put things together. Yeah, I've got lots of different lives. I have to try and put them all together, make it sound interesting. But yes, it was. I mean, it's so strange because, first of all, I didn't even know who they were. It wasn't like I waved to them and they said, oh, by the way, come over. I mean, they came over to me. It's just so weird. When you never know what's going to happen in your life. You're sitting there minding your own business, eating my tuna salad sandwich, and suddenly my whole life is about to change.
The Monkees.
Monkees, yeah.
Now, I'd like to thank you so much, Joey, for coming on the Plastic EP and Vicky's show. Vicky would like to thank you for being on the show also.
Yes, a big, big thank you from Down Under. We love to have you. We've loved having you on the show, Joey. Congratulations on joining us on Plastic's 450th show. It's been a real pleasure.
What a great, it's been wonderful for me, meeting both of you. I lived in Australia, I lived there for 10 years.
Fantastic.
So
we're from Melbourne, and I've got to say I've been married to Mrs. Plastic EP here for 35 years. We're actually husband and wife.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so you must, so I was there, I lived there for 10 years in the 70s and the 80s. I lived in Sydney.
Amazing.
It's so beautiful in Sydney.
Now, I just got to ask you, Joey, before we go, if you're going to tell everyone in America about how great Australia is, how do you sum it up?
I just think the people are great. I think the people, that's for me, that's how I remember Australia. They're just the people. They have a wonderful sense of humor. They have a great sense of fun. And they just have that, it's hard to get to know Australians. I had a hard time getting to know anyone. But once you know them, they're kind of like English people. They're there for you forever. They're your friends and they're very loyal. And
Joey, I wish we knew you then in the 70s because you'd have been our friends straight away. But let me say, the lifestyle here, the beaches, the bush, the cafes now, everything is the best in the world. We hope that you come back. And if you come back to Melbourne, you'll be coming as our guest to visit us. We'll be taking you out one day for dinner. We want you to come to
Yes.
Melbourne.
Oh, that would be so lovely. I used to go to Melbourne a lot when I lived there, so I know. But I've seen documentaries how it looks today. It didn't look like that when I was there. It's beautiful.
Exactly, but we'll take you to the Yarra Valley 1 hour out from Melbourne where all the wineries are, and we'll have a great time. You will love it.
Oh, we can't wait.
Wonderful. Well, I'll keep in touch with you, let you know if I do. That would be so lovely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. And as I said, thank you so much for being on our show. Thanks again for being on the Plastic EP and
Vicky Show. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Vicky. Bye, Plastic.
Bye.